Hey, this is David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. I have a favor to ask before we get to today's conversation. We're doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. And even if you took it last year, we'd be grateful if you took it again, because we can't use last year's data. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long, we know, because we timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast swag, that great CityCast swag. citycast.fm/survey.
Today on CityCast DC, we are talking with the Washington Post's Lisa Rein about the new Trump administration's role as our city's biggest employer and what that whirlwind of new rules means for us. Plus, Washingtonian food critic Ann Limpert is going to share highlights from the magazine's annual list of top restaurants. Yes, this is the very weird split screen that is DC in 2025. Today is Friday, January 24th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Lisa.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thanks for being here. Hey, Ann.
Hi. Good to see you.
So, Lisa, you're the Post reporter who covers the federal workforce. Big week for you.
Absolutely big week. I mean, President Trump, within hours of taking the oath of office for a second time, issued a tsunami of executive orders that deal with, working conditions and, future very serious conditions, I think, in the near future for people who work for the federal government. And these executive orders dealt with issues from telework and remote work, which we know has been a big worry of people working in the government, basically demanding that people return to the office to work, to things like there was a new order to change the course of federal hiring, which a lot of people on both sides of the aisle have called for, but it could reinstate civil service assessment tests that have been out for a long time. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Let's go down the list a little bit. One of the things that got a lot of attention, before the election was Schedule F, which is, moving, as I understand it, moving a lot of career employees to this new category that would basically make it easier for them to be fired and replaced with political appointees, political loyalists. What is that? How does it work?
That was a big one that was very anticipated. So it's got a new name. It's no longer called Schedule F. It's called Policy/Career. And that's going to be the occupational category that these people fall into. But basically, the administration is ordering federal agencies to come up with a list of employees, civil service, career employees who serve in policy roles. So that could be an attorney, it could be someone at the EPA who decides what we do about clean air. It could be someone at NASA. I mean, it just covers the whole gamut. And policy is kind of what the government does. So the idea would be to put these people into this new occupational category where essentially they would be at-will employees. At-will is someone who doesn't have due process rights that most of the government has, and it would make them essentially political appointees. That's what at-will means, who come in with each administration. But the reason they're doing this is because they feel that in the first term, Trump's first term, they had a lot of career civil servants who were resistant to their policies, and they want to basically put them on notice that if they are resistant, if they have poor performance, if they are corrupt in any way, they'll be kicked out and fired, which is something that's hard to do right now.
So in the reporting in the national and political press, this has obviously been covered as this is hugely important for the governance of the United States. For those of us who live in DC, there's this other thing, which is that these are our neighbors we're talking about who might lose jobs, or if they don't lose jobs, then the sort of meaning of their job might change, and in a way that makes them feel a lot less proud of what they do because it's much more politicized. And do you have you're a DC resident, lifelong Washington person. I imagine just school playground or life, you know, people who are like affected by this in real time.
Oh, yeah. People who are thinking of moving, of leaving their jobs. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of anxiety.
One of the other changes this week that was sort of less talked about is changes in hiring. You know, they talked about making it faster, which seems great, but they also talked about getting rid of, you know, generation old or 2 generations old policies on affirmative action, diversity in hiring, et cetera. What exactly is changing?
That's really a huge one, Michael. And I just want to go back to this new job category for a moment. I spoke with a senior Trump official last night who said, look, if you do your job well, and you're a good citizen of the Trump administration, you know, you do what we ask you to do, you're going to be fine. So it doesn't mean that everyone who is put in this new job category with no protections is going to be fired. I do want to say that so that people are not really terrified. And it could be 50,000 people, it could be 100,000, we don't know. But back to the other major change, basically the administration is dispensing with DEI programs. These are programs that support diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal workforce that the Biden administration, you know, put in and made a lot of hires to implement. And they are people who also support contractors. And my colleague, Julian Mark, has a really good story about this that on our website. And it's really, really a huge change because DEI was supposed to be basically, you know, setting up a barrier to discrimination. And what the Trump team has decided is that these programs itself represent discrimination in the workplace. And so what they've done, and this has all been happening basically yesterday, and it'll continue today, is that people are getting put on paid leave who work in DEI programs that were largely, as I said, set up by the Biden team. And, you know, they're basically going to prepare the Trump people to lay them off. The government must pay them severance, but it's pretty drastic. And I think they're putting their line in the sand very early on. I don't think this is going to be the first series of layoffs, but they started with this group.
And what you mentioned also is that some of this stuff affects not just federal employees, but government contractors, which is, you know, in the District of Columbia, there's 800,000 or so jobs in total, and about 200,000 of those are federal employees, but a lot more, I don't know the number, are government contractors. So some of these orders have banned DEI practices in government contracting too, and including, you know, stuff that goes back to LBJ. So this is not just sort of, George Floyd era stuff. A lot of people, when they hear DEI, I think, you know, think of like, you know, workplace trainings. But in fact, we're talking a lot about, you know, who actually gets in the door and who gets hired, which were policies that, you know, really made a major impact over the last 50 years in how the DC area works and who lives here.
That's right. And what the Trump administration's view seems to be is that this sort of leveling will happen naturally, and that if you're a good candidate for a job, whatever your color, whatever your race, you know, you'll get hired. And, you know, we know that the civil rights legislation has tried to rectify, you know, decades and decades of discrimination, but they view these programs as a form of discrimination. And the other thing is that what I've been learning is that, you know, these DEI programs were also in some agencies embedded in the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, which is a little bit different. So but it's sort of related. So those are offices staffed with people who are tasked with assessing complaints from employees who claim that they have been discriminated against in the workplace, whether it's racial discrimination, gender discrimination, you know, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. So I'm trying to figure out what is happening to those staffs, because the two staffs were really intermingled in a lot of these offices. So I'm not sure exactly I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, and then the question for our city, I think, is like, look, this is, you know, it's not the only employer, but it's a major employer. And if we count government contractors, it gets to be a pretty big percentage. But is this going to be attractive work, the kind of thing that causes talented people to move here, begin their lives here. It enables people of all backgrounds and from DC to like have jobs and rise here. And that's one of the questions that against this backdrop, this other thing you've been covering, which is return to work, seems like rather small potatoes or sort of foregone conclusion. Trump has ordered all federal employees back to work on some sort of not quite clear, as soon as practicable schedule. And the city government is happy about this. Local businesses, restaurants, et cetera, are happy about this. What the most interesting pushback against it, I think, is that like people are saying, well, this is going to make it harder for the government to attract and retain talent because the private sector has become so much more flexible, not just about where you work, but all kinds of ways. And talented people are, that in addition to money, that's going to provide another reason why you don't want to work for the feds. I mean, I don't think the Trump administration probably cares because I think they want fewer employees. But is that a legit concern for people who think about DC's future?
I think so. The other thing just to remember is that the Trump administration imposed a hiring freeze across the government for an indefinite period of time. It could, it'll vary from agency to agency. So they don't really like the IRS. So the IRS's hiring freeze will probably extend for a long time. There will be exceptions that will creep in at other agencies, I believe. And job offers are being rescinded. I've been hearing about this, looking at Reddit sites and seeing people devastated to see that a job offer that they had 5 days ago has suddenly been rescinded. But Michael, in the broader question you're asking is, do people want to work for the government? And I think we will see a smaller government, partly, because people are already quitting on their own. The telework policy will definitely make people quit. And I think that is the intention of the Trump team, because people have already rearranged their lives and childcare, so that they could work from home. The private sector is more appealing. So yeah, yes, the government will be less appealing to some people. On the other hand, there are many agencies that are pretty non-neutral in the eyes of the new administration. And so I think that, if you want to go to work for NASA, that might be an exciting place to work right now.
There's no way to make this transition other than really awkwardly, because at the same time as there is, really unprecedented amounts of anxiety about the basics of like work and stability in a city that's always, whatever else is happening, has been a fairly stable place. Life goes on, and you cover restaurants, and every year you make a list of the top 100 restaurants, red hot. This year, the number one spot was Albi, which you and I have actually eaten at together. Well, in one way, it seems of the times, it's pretty pricey. In one way, not so much, which is it's a Palestinian restaurant. What made you guys pick that?
Well, it's funny that you say it's pretty pricey because the price point for your like typical special occasion tasting menu dinner is over $1,000 now for two.
Holy moly!
At Minibar, at John, at the Inn your Pineapple and Pearls, it's at least going to be $1,000. Whether or not you drink. So to me, Albi is is a real value. You can you can eat extremely well, extremely, heartily, and get out of there for like $400. So the chef is Michael Rafidi. He's had a very big 2024. He was named best chef in the country by the James Beard Foundation. And Albi's 5 years old. It opened right before the pandemic. It was actually my last restaurant meal before everything shut down. And I remember eating there and thinking, oh my God, DC is so lucky to have a place like this. And it's just gotten better and better every year. And he's interesting because he grew up in Maryland. His family is Palestinian. So the restaurant's very much rooted in Palestinian Levantine flavors, but he brings some Mid-Atlantic into it sometimes. And he worked for Michael Mina in California for a very long time. So he has this, he ran one of his French restaurants there. So he kind of brings it all together at Albi. It's wonderful. And the only bad part about it is it's impossible to get into.
Rafidi's other places, Yellow, Chakran, are also on your list.
Yes. Yeah. La Choucron is one of my very favorite openings from late last year. It is above the new Yellow at Union Market. It takes a little work to find it. It's in a back alley, but it's this very cool, like loungy, sexy, kind of hidden away spot that is French Middle Eastern. So steak à poivre kebabs, escargot with hummus. But the food is similarly like just on point. And Yellow is just a great value. And also, Yellow kind of shifts from morning pastries and sandwiches from during the day to the Union Market location does something at night called All the Kebabs, which is just a big kebab feast. The Georgetown location does, they call it Not Pizza.
Right, so tell us about some of the other top 10.
Yeah. I mean, so Dogon is also really exciting. That is the return of Kwame Onwuachi, who was the chef at Kith and Kin at the Wharf. And when that closed during the pandemic, he went to New York. And he was already kind of on this like meteoric trajectory, but he opened a restaurant in New York called Tatiana, which for the last 2 years, the New York Times has named #1 restaurant in the city. Dogon is really interesting because it is in the Salamander Hotel in Southwest DC. People really get dressed up to go there. It's like very swank feeling. And the food is the restaurant's named for the Dogon tribe from West Africa. And so the food is sort of like this hybrid of DC, West Africa, Caribbean. There's like a dish there that is inspired by Ben Ali, the founder of Ben's Chili Bowl, who was from Trinidad. So it's this, it's a spiced lamb with chickpeas. But the food it's incredible. It's delicious. And it's exciting. It feels very new.
One question I had for you, Anne, is this sort of high-end, wonderful shift that we've been seeing for a while in DC, has it come to the suburbs? I live in Silver Spring. There's Arlington, there's Fairfax. A lot of people don't live in the city and live in Maryland and suburbs and Northern Virginia. Are chefs going there because maybe the rents are cheaper and they realize that, interesting people with a little money might want to pay there?
Yes, definitely. And also DC doing away with tipping. I think as a server, you can make more money at a place that allows more traditional tipping.
Wait, so is it just me or was your list more suburbsy this year?
I really try and pay close attention to that. So I count every year. Maryland is always tough, but Maryland had Aventino and Bethesda. In Silver Spring, there's Betaseb, which is the best Ethiopian right now. And Virginia, Falls Church, there's a lot, and there's a lot that's new. So I think the suburbs are, definitely during the pandemic, when people were coming into the city less, you saw more openings there. But, one is Ellie Bird, who the couple behind Rooster and Owl, which is number 6 on our list, which is this great little tasting menu spot. And on 14th Street, they opened Ellie Bird in Falls Church about a year ago. And it's just this very cool, but it's very family friendly. There's a cocktail there that's named for like Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards, and it looks like slime. So it's kind of got the same whimsy, but a little more casual and approachable.
If I wanted to not break the bank, but also go to a top 100 restaurant, is there a favorite of yours or a top performer there?
I have to say 250 Barbecue, if you haven't had it, in Riverdale Park, and one in Mount Vernon Triangle. And it's all wood smoke, Texas-style barbecue. Their brisket is amazing, but also their pulled pork is terrific. Their sides are great. Definitely hard to beat that. Yellow. And then for I really love Caruso's Grocery, which is Italian-American, very, it's a pretty straightforward menu. It's, it's chicken parm, it's shrimp scampi, it's fried calamari, but it's all done really, really, really well. And there's always just like a little something extra that makes each dish not like every other chicken parm you've ever had.
Maybe we can bring this all together here, which is that we're only like 2-3 days in to whatever the Trump administration is going to do to the workforce, the federal workforce. And, it's been knocked on all kinds, the pushback has been on all kinds of levels about the, democracy, good government, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't really heard a kind of class critique of it, which is to say a lot of the people who are getting messed with here are, these are not fancy elites. These are the sort of backbone of the middle class, and in some cases, the lower middle class of the DC area, federal laborers. And, all over inaugural weekend, there was this sense of like glittering and all of these spotteds of, plutocrats in like private rooms at Osteria Mosa, which is, Anne can tell us, like a brand new, very glittery restaurant. Are we, either by the organized, opponents of these federal moves or anyone else, are we going to see a sort of like, DC is in a glittering age where like plutocrats are throwing middle class workers to the wolves? And is any of the stuff that actually goes on in terms of like where people eat and entertain themselves going to be part of that? Will the momentum from like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk being here for the weekend carry? I don't know, but I do think that there is this. I mean, Osteria Mosa is an interesting place. It's owned by Steven Starr, who also owns Le Diplomat. He's a restaurateur whose places are very used to handling very important people. And it was packed from the day it opened. I mean, I just reviewed it, and, people kind of stopped standing in line during the pandemic. The standing in line at Bad Saints, standing in line at Roses. You don't really see that anymore. I got to Osteria Mosa at 4:45 on a Tuesday, and I stood in line halfway down the block. And it has a very clubby vibe. Almost feels a little Milano. It's hard to know whether to attribute to this, but there's always sort of this gravitating to this like kind of like throwback idea of elegance. Like the typical DC steakhouse doesn't feel super vibrant, but Steven Starr's version, which is coming to the Occidental, might feel a lot more exciting. Lisa, you think the unions you cover or some of the advocates you cover are going to be out picketing?
I don't know. We've seen the resistance is a little bit muted so far. But, I remember in the first Trump term, right, we had the Trump Hotel, which is in the old post office building. That's now, no longer owned by the Trumps, although reportedly they want to get it back. So, but Trump really didn't, in a lot of ways, didn't really put his imprint on the city in the way that, let's say, Obama did. I'm really watching, and I know, Ann, you will be too, just to see if there's more wealth, that's more conspicuous wealth that is coming out, whether these tech people are going to be just flooding the city as they try to, do business with the administration, as they try to, change the government. We know there's this commission called the Department of Government Efficiency that's going to be based here. Going to have a lot of input from the tech titans. And yeah, I'm just waiting to see if the business of restaurants, the business of food, the business of retail just caters to these people or not, in a way that I think the Trump Hotel tried to cater, to foreign visitors and, to Trump world, but isn't going to do that. What's the Trump Hotel going to be replaced by?
Maybe the Trump Hotel.
I also feel like in DC, like there's always been money in DC, but the flexes have been so quiet. It's like, the $15,000 college counselor for your kid or, your membership at the Chevy Chase Club. It's not this flashy exuding of money. So I don't know that will change, but we'll see.
We'll see. Hey, Lisa, Ann, thank you guys for being here.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, but don't go anywhere just yet. My colleague Julia Caron's here too. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
And we're going to talk membership for a second, yes?
Yes, we are. So here's the deal. I find that in times when stuff is a little weird, as you've mentioned on the podcast, I think the last week plus, we have this weird duality in Washington going on where the Trump takeover is going to affect DC in this very weird way that we don't know what's going to happen necessarily. But there's also a lot of joy to be had at the same time, especially in community, whether that is through going with friends to, a top 100 restaurant like Ann might have mentioned. It is a very strange time in DC.
Well, and also, look, at all of America, the whole world really, is going to be obsessing over the stuff that this very disruptive new government of ours has. But I also feel like people who live here are sort of like, our part of that conversation is actually not like overexposed, which is, our part is like, dude, our neighbors, maybe ourselves, might lose jobs over this, might lose civil rights over this, all as a function of being residents of DC. And, look, on a national level, these are not the most important things in the world, but to those of us who live here, they're pretty damn important.
Yeah. And realistically, my view is people need to stay informed about everything that is going on, the good and the bad. And if any of you have found community or have found us to be useful in any way for letting you know what is happening specifically in DC, please, please, please become a member. It is really important. Mike, what do they get if they are a member?
They get a weekly events email, they get ad-free listening, and they get the joy and satisfaction of knowing that they helped promote local media. We're not federal workers, but local media has its challenges too, as you may have heard.
Yeah. I mean, our view here is we help you become a better neighbor. We help inform you about everything that is going on. So if you are interested, membership.citycast.fm. It's $8 a month. And it really does help, us do our jobs, which is to inform you and help build community. I love doing this work. I think Mike loves doing this work too, of keeping everybody informed. But it is really, really tough, hard work. And so we want to stay around to let you know what's going down.
All right. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Mike.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, and Elizabeth Kama. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell everyone about it next time you go to a fancy dinner at your private club? We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.